And today we're here with Professor Gay Hoagland and Program Director Nareda Salinas, as well as one alum so far, and hopefully we'll be joined by another one. And today's webinar is primarily an opportunity for you to ask questions of Professor Hoagland and our alumni. But to offer a little bit of context for our discussion, I'm going to begin with a brief overview of the Policy Organization Leadership Studies, or POLS program, as well as the Joint MA-MBA program. And then following that overview, I'm going to turn it over to Nareda, who's going to question our guest for approximately 35 minutes, and then with the remainder of the hour, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. And if after today you've got further questions that haven't been answered by our website, I do invite you to sign up for one of our upcoming general informational webinars, where we go into a lot more detail about both programs. And as with this webinar, you can register for that on our website. Oh, seems to be a little stuck here. But anyway, trying to get my visuals taken care of. One moment. So the School of Education's Policy and Organizational Leadership Studies and the Joint MA-MBA degrees sit at the crossroads of policy, organizational leadership, and teaching and learning. And both programs draw upon an interdisciplinary knowledge base that emphasizes the organizational and policy context of education and the knowledge needed to lead within them. So both of these programs are full-time programs. The POLS program is a 3-quarter or 9-month program. It consists of a cohort of 35 individuals from all walks of life, and people come from a range of backgrounds and experience. Some, but not all of them, have teaching experience, and upon graduating, they enter leadership roles in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. The Joint MA in Education and MBA program is a 2-year and generally a 6-quarter program. Sometimes it extends to a 7th quarter. It's a cohort of approximately 22 students. And as I said, most degree students complete their degree in 6 quarters, but there are a few who perhaps would like to gain a deeper knowledge in education, and they may opt to enroll for an additional quarter. And for the joint program, the first year is your typical core MBA curriculum with the addition of I can make sure, sorry, I should have mentioned this earlier, but if everyone could mute, I think it would help us out a lot. Not sure what that effect is. Anyway, getting back to talking about the joint degree program, in the first year we have what is called our Spring Quarter Pro Seminar. It's a required class that is an opportunity for the joint MA-MBA cohort to come together for some basic grounding in education policy, research, and organization. And then it's during your second year that you really delve into the School of Education program of study. So I'm sure a number of you have asked about what our graduates go on to do. So this is just a sampling of what our POLS graduates recently have gone on to do. As you notice, there's a wide range of leadership positions that they've taken on in public, private, and the nonprofit sector, both in K-12 as well as higher education across the country and around the world. And likewise, our joint degree students also enter a number of leadership positions. Some go directly into the education sector, while others may use their background in education in different ways. And here, again, are just a few examples of what some of our recent joint degree graduates have ended up doing. So with that brief introduction, I'd like to transition to the moderated section of our webinar, and I'll turn things over to Nareda Salinas, the program director.
Thank you so much, Emmy, and thanks for setting us up with that picture of the two programs. My goal today is to give you, the participants, and those who are listening, just a deeper understanding of what the pre-K-12 concentration and experience for the POLS and joint MA-MBA students is. we're really fortunate to have Gay Hoagland here, who is one of our phenomenal faculty members, as well as Lauren, who's one of our joint MBA alumni. Zoe, have you been able to join us? I don't think Zoe's with us yet, so hopefully if she comes on, Emmy will let us know, and we'll integrate her as well. We're going to get started. I thought it would be best for you to know who you're talking to. So, Gay, would you mind telling us briefly about your career path and what courses you've taught and what you're currently doing now, and kind of, you know, who is this amazing person that everybody who's in pre-K-12 in POLS or the joint degree will be touched by in some way, shape, or form?
Oh, what a great introduction. I can't live up to that, but I can share sort of where I've been. I got into teaching by pure accident, and literally on the first day found my vocation when I realized what the schools were doing to the kids, and then, of course, to the teachers. So that meant that from then on I was on a mission to try to change the schools, which took me into a real interest in whether they were well led. That meant I had to get a doctorate because that was a union card. It was also a way to learn a lot. And since then, I've been lucky to work at a number of different levels. I worked with the State Department and the University in Indiana with districts all over the state on a school change agenda. I directed a center in St. Louis for 45 school districts who were very concerned about equity issues and the achievement gap in their schools, and that pulled in corporations and the university, and all of us had an extraordinary time with a very big agenda. I was the director of Coalition of Essential Schools in San Francisco because I cared about what they were doing to try to fundamentally change the experience of kids in schools and the nature of teaching and learning, and then ended up for 10 years as a faculty member and department chair at Cal State, where focused on educational leadership, on people who were going to be administrators, which unexpectedly, when it ended, I found myself at Stanford and part of this amazing program. So all in all, I can say that if you get to work with schools, it's a play at the core in our society.
Thank you, Gay. And I really appreciate you setting up all that context, and when people hear about the experience in your class, why it is so real and so relevant will be that much clearer for everyone. Lauren, would you mind going to briefly introducing yourself as well?
Sure. So I'm Lauren Pongan. I was an accounting major actually in college at the University of Richmond. And after 3 years of studying accounting, I decided I did not want to be a CPA, and around that same time ran into a Teach for America recruiter on my campus who convinced me that I would get a tremendous leadership experience that would not be available to me in public accounting if I went and taught high school math in Charlotte, North Carolina. So really having no idea what was going on in schools short of the one that I attended growing up, I moved to North Carolina and was placed in a public high school teaching geometry. So the pure accident that Gay kind of alluded to, I feel like I was the fortuitous recipient of as well, because I got into my classroom and first of all just developed tremendous relationships with my students and was inspired to work potentially for the rest of my career in some capacity, making a difference for them and students like them. But I also saw some of the problems that were occurring in my school and the school district, and so kind of decided once I got there that long-term education is where I wanted to be. That said, combination of credentialing issues and really a desire to gain additional leadership and problem-solving skills led me to leave the classroom after 2 years, and I went to work at Deloitte Consulting and Management Consulting, sort of as a bridge to find my way to business school. So I, in 2009, arrived at Stanford to do the MBA MA program, which was a fantastic experience for me. I completed my degree in June, and I'm currently back at Deloitte Consulting doing some extracurricular things that keep me involved with the schools while trying to build sort of my management capacity further, as well as take advantage of the sponsorship, truthfully, that the company is providing me for my 2 years of school. So that's me.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, I'd like to start with
Zoe just joined the call.
Oh, wonderful,
hey,
Zoe. I'm so glad you're here. Zoe, would you mind introducing yourself and just kind of giving the highlights about what path led you to polls, and then from polls where you are now?
Sure. So I apologize for being late. I'm currently an assistant principal at Boyce Charter School, which is a kindergarten to 4th grade school in Long Island City, Queens. And I came to polls through a partnership that existed with New Leaders for New Schools, which is a national principal leadership program to which I applied to and was accepted. And they told me about the program at Stanford, and I decided that that would be a great way for me to both get prepared for school leadership as well as explore my longstanding interest in policy.
And do you want to briefly touch upon, Zoe, what you were doing in undergrad and where you went to undergrad? Just because I know sometimes our participants wonder if there's one major that prepares you for these degrees or this type of career.
Sure. So I did my undergrad at Haverford, which is in outside Philadelphia, in political science. And then I came to New York and I joined the New York City Teaching Fellows Program, where I taught 1st and 2nd grade and received a master's from St. John's University in elementary education.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And that partnership that Zoe just mentioned with New Leaders for New Schools is something that still exists. And the way that it works is you apply to both programs simultaneously, to the POLS program and to New Leaders. And if you're admitted to both, there's fellowship money that's awarded to you, as well as a lot of coordination so that you can go seamlessly directly after the POLS program to a deferred admission into the New Leaders Preparation Program for your principalship. And I'm sure Zoe can answer more of those questions in the Q&A, since she's a living prototype of it. I'd like to start with you, Gay. Could you talk a little bit about what makes Stanford such a unique place to study the area of education?
Sure. I think I guess I jumped to 3 things. The first is the extraordinary intellectual range and quality and challenge of the Stanford School of Education. The faculty is just amazing, and the school is so focused on issues of values and equity, that, as well as the rigor of the research, that it's really a drink from a fire hose to be here. The second thing is that it draws in passionate and mission-driven students, and so the colleagues with whom you journey through the program here are as amazing a source of challenge and learning as any of the courses. And the third thing, I think, and it's not small, is that it's located in Silicon Valley. And the sense of possibility here, the sense of entrepreneurial energy and challenging the system and try anything, is a real counterpoint to the world of compliance that controls most schools. So whether you're meeting Silicon Valley people or just breathing the entrepreneurial air around Stanford, you're in a pretty special place.
Thank you. Very, very well said. Thank you so much, Gabe, for that perspective. Now, you teach a very popular course here, and you do a number of independent studies that sometimes turn into mini courses of their own. Can you talk a little bit about those courses, Gay, and the composition of the students that typically enroll in them?
Yeah, there are different levels of courses here. There are courses at 30,000 feet that give you a look at the whole terrain of education and get you into issues, and then there are specific laser-like courses focused on policy or history or whatever. And then there are courses that sort of put you at 3 feet with particular things you're interested in. The courses I teach, I think, stand at the intersection between theory and practice. And try to land the ideas and the research and the issues in the real world of creating great schools. So there's a decision-making course that takes 6 or 7 terrifically demanding issues that every school is going to encounter: curriculum, equity, tracking, parents, resources. And we look at those through the lens of the decision-making processes that will not only deal with the issue, but it'll build the capacity of that school to become a powerful and self-renewing place. So that is just more fun than you can imagine. The independent courses and the reading courses pick up with 4 or 5 students at a time who have a particular interest. And those are fascinating. The charter schools or human resource issues or equity issues or tracking issues. And then at least once I've taught a course on nonprofit strategy and management for people who are getting into startups, because so many of the students want to launch things, and there are some very interesting and common challenges they're going to encounter. So that course was a chance to look at that. So that's an example.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Gay. Lauren and Zoe, I was wondering if you two, maybe we can start with you, Lauren, could highlight what most drew you to apply in your to your particular degree, and also finally to enroll in it, because if you were admitted to this program, you were admitted to numerous others. So what were the factors that really drew you and then helped you make the decision that this was the place that you belonged at?
Sure. So Gay kind of mentioned the advantage of Stanford being right in the Silicon Valley, and she talked about like the entrepreneurial culture. I would add to that and say, and it sounds flippant at first, but let me explain, that the weather of Northern California was part of the reason I applied. And so when I first started applying to schools and I came out to Stanford and visited the beautiful campus, I was like, you can't go to a school just because it's beautiful and warm and sunny. And I was speaking to one of the current students at the time in this joint degree program about her experience there, and her perception, which I found out to be completely true, was that the warm weather she thinks contributes to what I found to be a phenomenally collaborative community, both within the business school, within the ed school, on the campus in general. And people are all around campus all the time wanting to talk about ideas they have, things they're working on. And that to me is what kind of drew me to the school, was the vibe that I got when I was on campus of this like just really strong community. As far as the degree, so I was applying to business schools that had joint degrees with all different types of things that could touch on education, so public policy degrees, law degrees, et cetera. And I figured that in the short time that I was going to be in school, if I knew I wanted to be in education, I wanted to be in a place where I could dive really deep into that as sort of my elective courses to complement my business school coursework. And then in addition to that, the skill set I really wanted to develop while in school was focused around leadership and communication and how to inspire others to follow a vision I might have, whether that would be for a nonprofit or a school district. And I think of all of the business schools I looked at, Stanford's program for leadership development is certainly the strongest. So that's sort of how I narrowed it down once I'd done a lot of my applying.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. Zoe, could you touch upon what really drew you to the program and what finally made you decide this was the right place for you and the right fit?
Yeah, so I think for me, I found out, because I found about Stanford for New Leaders, I had actually not really considered getting an ed degree. And I think that was in part because I'd had a pretty terrible experience with my first master's in elementary education, and got a lot of feedback from other people saying masters of ed programs are not very rigorous and they're largely a waste of money. And so for me to think about making like the financial commitment as well as the opportunity cost, to not be working for a year, to relocate, because I was in New York and was going back to New York after my year, was huge, right? And so I think for me, what ultimately drew me to Stanford was the opportunity. So one, knowing it was Stanford, so it has the reputation for being like a rigorous place, but also knowing that I was not going to be in the ivory tower, that there was going to be practical connections, and I think that also it was that there was a master's program, and that it was not a PhD program, but that I would have access to some of the same experiences PhD students had. So while I was at Stanford, I took a doctoral seminar on math education. So it was me and 4 PhD students. So that was a wonderful experience. For me, a PhD was sort of road not taken, or maybe not taken yet. And so that was really important to me, that I'd be able to have access to that. And then the more I started learning about MBAs and the GSC, I think that became a real big draw for me, knowing that I would leading a school and needing to have kind of the skills around operations and finance and management that many ed schools definitely don't do well. And so that being able to kind of access that through resources through the connection with the business school was also like a big draw for me. And I think the final thing to kind of echo what Lauren said is I really did want to live in Northern California, and I really wanted that experience of being on a different coast. So I think a lot of people who are weighing Harvard versus Stanford kind of felt, well, is the networking better if you go to Harvard, because if you're in Boston or New York? And for me, like, I really wanted that West Coast experience. California has one of the most fascinating education systems. It's an incredibly underfunded one, so it made me also very grateful when I returned to my, much better funded state of New York. So I think that opportunity to see a totally different education system was also a really big draw for me, and I benefited tremendously from.
Coming with that perspective, Zoe, what was your biggest surprise when you arrived at Stanford?
I think I was surprised. That's a great question. I think I didn't necessarily know who my classmates would be at Stanford. Like, I didn't have a good sense. I mean, I came out for the kind of sell the program in the spring, and I met other people. So I didn't necessarily know what the makeup would be in terms of if they were former teachers or if they were people interested in philanthropy. I think that diversity of people with interest was something that was probably like a big surprise for me. And then I think the other thing that was a surprise for me is, as a practitioner, a lot of people will say, research isn't based in reality, and there's a lot of skepticism around research. And so I think coming to Stanford, I came to appreciate the rigor of how hard it is to create good research. So I worked with Susanna Loeb on a research project helping to collect data, and just sitting in on research meetings and listening to them kind of agonize over these design details and how important it is and how much integrity it's done with it gave me a lot of respect for the way research is created. I still have some of my skepticism about the utility of some of that research sometimes, but I was sort of surprised by how much I respect the methodology and the integrity it takes to produce that research.
You were part of the principal shadowing that first year, weren't you, Zoe?
Yes, I was.
Do you want to just briefly touch upon what that looked like and the value to you? Because that's something that's we've done just about every year since then. There was 1 year where it didn't align, but last year we had a number of polls, and it was open to polls and joint degree students to participate again. I don't know if you want to briefly talk about that.
Yeah, it was wonderful. So basically, I did it both in Milwaukee and in San Francisco. And so in Milwaukee, we were there for 5 days. And each day I spent with a different school leader, following them around, and every 5 minutes a timer would go off, and I would need to code the activity they were doing that time. So for anyone who's interested in schools, being able to see, I got to see 10 different schools by the end of that, it was just amazing. And then I think then at the end you have a one-on-one interview with that principal where you ask them questions. So being able to ask the same questions across several principals who are leading very different kinds of schools, so from an alternative high school to an elementary, K-2 progressive school, getting to see how principals thought about their leadership and really spent their time was amazing. And then now when I see like the studies coming out about it that they're publishing as a result of the data, that's super exciting to also really know that I helped collect some of that data was certainly a highlight for me.
Great, thank you, Zoe, for touching upon that experience. I know it's I was quite excited for all of you when you were participating in that. Lauren, what was your biggest surprise upon arriving at Stanford?
So the first thing that came to mind, actually, Zoe kind of hit, which was the diversity in my class. And I don't know why I was expecting that everyone in the POLS program with whom I took a lot of classes would have been teachers and school leaders, and everyone in the business school would have been consultants and bankers, et cetera. So the fact that people had just a tremendous diversity of background was surprising, but I think also the value that diversity provided to me in progressing my thinking about what would make an impact in K-12 education and what might not. So it wasn't just the fact that there were people there with different experiences, but those different experiences had led them to to have like different ideas. And while I came to school, certainly not thinking I had all the answers, but having like a pretty well-formed, or at least I thought, theory of change, it was really cool to get to talk to a lot of people and hear kind of their perspectives from their previous lives and have that evolve quite a bit during my 2 years there.
Thank you, Lauren. And Gay, on the theme of surprises, what's been one of your surprises in teaching POLS and joint MA/MBA students? And maybe while you're mentioning that, you can also weave in some of your favorite moments from your courses working with these students.
I'm not sure surprise is the right word. Maybe it's more deepening, extraordinary appreciation. First of all, the combination of MBA and POLS students in the room coming from this wide array of experience, but with very many common values and sources of excitement, meant that you have energy in the room that is both disciplined and boundless. And secondly, it's just a sheer joy to get into stuff this important with colleagues like that. And the level of expertise in the room it's uneven, but it's so high that there's almost no limit to what you could do if you had the time. So it's more a matter of just celebrating the fact you get to be part of it. In terms of fun moments in class, I can think of two sort of right off the bat. One is when I set up what I thought was a terrifically important and passionate conversation, a dialogue with protocols among the members of the class, and I was so sort of pleased that we were getting to the heart of the matter. And we went on break, and a wonderful student came up to me and said, "Now, tell me precisely what was supposed to be the value of all that." And I thought, right. So, then that question becomes the text for the class when they come back from break. But the freedom to challenge the process, to challenge the teacher, to demand that it add value, and then to toss that back to the class is, it's one of those moments a teacher will cherish. I think the other, endless great moments is that the students go out into real schools and write real cases based on real decisions that are either recent or current in those schools. So they are exploring the various forces in play in a school, and they're talking to the people on different sides of an issue, and then they have to figure out not only what was the issue and what was the process, but how did this school go about deciding it, and then they write up a case in a way that we have no idea, the rest of us, what the outcome was or will be. And then they take the class through the case. So it brings in sort of intellectual sparks from a number of directions. What they've learned about the school, the way they set up the dilemma, the way the class gets into the dilemma, and the fact that you've got these marvelous students teaching each other. Doesn't get any better than that.
Thank you, Gay. Lauren, I wanted to ask, could you touch upon one or two of the courses that I know you're fresh into your sort of post joint MA/MBA experience, but could you touch upon which courses you really felt added the most value to your graduate experience on the education side?
Yeah, I guess I would start with the pro seminar course that all of the MBA MAs take at the end of our first year. So just to give a little bit of background, it's a course that meets once a week, every week throughout the quarter, and each week there's a different researcher from the faculty that comes in and presents their research to the class, and then the class spends probably an hour and a half to 2 hours asking questions and discussing kind of our impressions and our thoughts about the research. And that was really interesting to me because I came in sort of laser focused on what it is I thought was wrong with K-12 education, what it is I thought could fix it, and it provided a great, broad overview of all the different, and it, even went a little bit beyond K-12, but even within K-12, all the different kind of components that are going into trying to reform the system, and got me thinking really broadly, which was fantastic. It also provided some perspective into, for me, not having had a background in, academic research, what that looks like and what the value of that is in applying it to practice. So that was very eye-opening to me. And then I guess the other two classes I would touch on were more, more practically based. I took a course called School Leadership last fall, and similar to some of the classes I took in the business school, it was case-based. So we would have, each week we were given a case, asked to read it, kind of prepare our thoughts on it, and then for the next couple weeks we'd work with a group and put together a plan for how we would deal with a specific issue that was going on in a school or a district, and then present that plan to the class as if we were presenting it to the teachers or the principals or whatever. So it was really awesome because it became sort of an experiential learning opportunity where I could apply some of the leadership and communication lessons that I had learned my first year in the business school to an education setting and see how those kind of hit or missed with people who had spent a lot more time in schools than I had. So those were two highlights for me.
Great, thank you, Lauren. Zoe, any courses that come to mind when you think of the ones that added the most value?
So I think it's hard for me, I mean, it's certainly hard to choose, like choosing among your children, right? They were all like amazing experiences. I think all of the ones that had speakers who came in from outside of Stanford to speak were really important to me. So I took a class at the D School that had, it was focused on human capital, which is like my particular policy interest. So how do you reimagine the career of a teacher? And so we had all kinds of people come in, from Rocket Ship to the New Teacher Center, Teach for America. So it was a wide diversity of speakers. So that was really amazing. With Larry Cuban, I took a class called Good Districts, Good Schools. So besides being able to be with Larry Cuban, which is a pretty just like rock star kind of experience, he's an incredible teacher, structures the class very well, and had readings that were theoretical enough to be rigorous, but also really kind of speaks to the experience of what's going on with schools and districts. And there were a lot of joint students in that class, and I always appreciated classes that were not just ed school classes. My favorite classes were always ones where there were joint degree students because many of them were not teachers and had not come from schools, and so the way they thought about schools was really different, and I appreciated that, the way that that really challenged me to think differently about schools.
Great.
Narita, can I just add something? This is Lauren. That I didn't say, I'm not just saying this because Gay is on the phone, but it's an element of what makes some of the classes at Stanford special that I think we missed and I want to hit on. I did do one of the smaller directed readings with Gay, so met with a group of, I don't know, it was less than 10 of my peers. It was about 10. Every couple of weeks with readings that were selected with the help of Gay, but really by my classmates. The topic was district leadership, and she brought in some fantastic speakers, but I think part of what made that class really special and something that I will always remember is the student-driven nature of it. So really getting to dive into what each of the people in the small group was interested in, and also the phenomenal speakers and support that Gay brought in and provided for the class. So.
No, thank you for mentioning that. The independent studies have definitely been growing more and more every year, I'd say, since I've been here for 4 years, and I've definitely seen that trend. Gay facilitates a number of those every winter and spring, and as well as other faculty. And so that's just something that I find more and more people are beginning to really start taking advantage of as early as fall quarter, which is wonderful. People really focusing what they're trying to get out, and if they don't out of the program, if they don't see it offered in a course, they begin really rallying the troops and exciting their peers about these topic areas and creating these 1 to 2 unit pass, fail, or letter grade small research, credit-bearing research or reading courses that they oversee with faculty, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes in small groups. Could both of you, right before we open up to Q&A, I was wondering with the students, so I hope that, the participants, those of you who've called in are ready with your questions, but I want to ask one more question before we transition over to that part. Can you talk about the connections that you made while you were here at Stanford, at the School of Ed, through your joint MA-MBA program, or the lessons that you learned here, and how those have continued to impact the development of your career and the thinking of your own career trajectory, or where you are now, depending on how far away you are from your experience? Zoe, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. So I say that I met my academic twin at Stanford. So there was someone in my program who in polls at the same time that I was, and we had very similar interests, so we took a lot of classes together, and we sort of always asked the question the other person was thinking. And so that was an important friendship that I've made. And even though we don't talk that often, we still send each other articles or say, did you see this? And talking about that. So I think that there were a couple of those connections that were like very deep and meaningful, as well as a lot of more acquaintance relationships. So I was at the Teach for America conference in the winter, and I saw people there. So there's sort of this feeling of kind of being able to be connected through polls. Like there's lots of couple degrees of separation. So I think that was certainly really powerful for me. And for me, Stanford was really refresh experience. I had been in education for 7 years in very underserved schools and really needed that opportunity to kind of relook at education. And I think more than anything, what polls gave me was a feeling of being part of an ed reform movement, that I was sort of not just this like one kind of soldier like marching out, like working in really hard schools, but was really working for things that I believe in and other people believe in too, and seeing how different people are attacking the problem in different ways. So seeing how a technology is being worked on to figure out how to do better one-on-one with kids, and figuring out how to create financial structures that are better for schools to fund them more fairly and more equitably, and people who were even to go back to their well-paying corporate jobs, but were making really big commitments. So I think that was some of the most.
Great, thank you, Zoe. Lauren, do you want to answer the question in terms of what connections you made here at Stanford, what lessons you learned? Lauren, just the connections that you made while you were at Stanford and the lessons you learned, how have those been contributing and playing out now that you've left Stanford, even though it's been a shorter time period than Zoe's, obviously?
Yeah, so let me actually start with the lessons learned, because that kind of leads into my connections that are being useful. So one of the great opportunities I had while at Stanford was to have, this plethora of learning experiences and talking to tons of people and having time to really reflect upon what excited me professionally. And kind of what came out of that was my passion, not just for K-12 education, but for like training and leadership development. So I was able to hone in on what I cared about functionally to go with what I cared about sort of like more broadly. And so what that's led me to is my internship last summer, as well as some stuff I'm doing at Deloitte right now, as well as some side work I'm doing for Teach for America around leadership coaching and training and development for, I guess it would be like core members. At Deloitte, it's my peers. Last summer, it was teachers in the district that I was working at. So my Stanford experience helped me hone in on what I cared about. And then what I would say is, because of the tremendous leadership development program that exists within both polls and the business school, I have so many faculty members, staff members at Stanford that are helping me to continue to kind of stay connected to learning in that area. The business school has a set of leadership coaches that work with a number of different courses I took, and 3 out of 6 of those people on staff are also on my speed dial. And I consider them like friends, mentors, and also they've just been tremendous help for me as I work to develop kind of materials for organizations that Teach for America and Deloitte that I care about in the leadership development space. So the faculty and the staff at Stanford is like a tremendous resource that I'm supremely grateful for being connected to the time I was there, and then continuing to be connected to even after leaving campus.
Thank you, Lauren. So I want to thank everybody for, first of all, I want to acknowledge how just the fact that we were all able to transition so quickly off the call and back on the call. And just turning on a dime is something that always impresses me in terms of Stanford people. In terms of our participants, I want to turn the panel over to you now. And if you can please state your name and what program you're more interested in, or both, and then also to whom your question is directed, Gay or Lauren or Zoe or myself, if it's more about degree progress, but degree requirements, but I definitely encourage you to take advantage of the panel at this point. So can we have our first question from the audience?
Hello? Hi, this is Martin Green. I just have a quick question for Lauren and anybody else who could give me information on the MA MBA program.
Any particular type of information that you're looking for?
Yeah, the question's around. So Lauren had mentioned that you know, from a leadership and communication perspective, she was able to leverage, you know, her first year MBA experience for the Master's in Education portion. In her second year, I was wondering, Lauren or anybody else, are there other kind of key things that came out of your business side of things that you were able to apply to the you know, education side as well? Any other key skills?
Yeah, I think certainly, and this may be, like, do you mean in the classroom or that I would be able to apply, like, going into education? Because I guess what I would say is last summer I did an internship working for the superintendent in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, and pretty much everything that I had learned in my first year of business school was applicable, whether it was like management of my team of 12 that I was given for this summer, whether it was like budgeting for the leadership development program that I was running. Like the communication, I think, is another key point. I think that I sort of expected that there was less crossover in skills that you'd learn in business school and skills that you would need to lead in K-12 education than I've learned that there is. Like, I think you can pretty much, and the way Stanford teaches it is to a broad base of students who have all kinds of interests, so they like make it intentionally, make the skills that you're learning intentionally applicable, like, across sectors.
Thanks, Lauren.
Next question.
Hi, guys. This is Mayank. I'm calling you from New Delhi in India. And my question is directed towards Lauren as well as Professor Gay. I was just wondering, how relevant is the MA MBA program for international applicants? I guess especially the MA and the education program. How relevant is it for applicants based outside the U.S. in terms of its coursework, in terms of the case studies, and do you get exposure to schools and learning systems outside the U.S. as well?
Go, Lauren. Go first on that, and then talk to, or Lauren, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think Lauren can, yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
Well, one thing I can say is, like, anecdotally, there were at least three that I can, as you were asking that question, there are at least three of the people in my cohort who were international students coming to the U.S. to do this program. So it certainly can be applicable. I guess I would need to know, like, contextually, like, so a lot of the case studies in the education coursework are U.S. focused. In the business curriculum, that's completely not true, and they have like a large global management initiative. So I would say, as far as synthesizing some of the learnings from your education coursework into like a local context, if your intention was to go back and work in education in India, like, some of that would be up to you, but there are plenty of your classmates who will, particularly in the business school, who will want to be taking their lessons learned and going back to work internationally as well, who you can kind of like collaborate with and work with and network with also.
I would add, this is Nareda, just interject that about 20% in a given year of the joint MA MBA cohort consists of international students. And we also at the School of Ed have a lot of the joint MA MBA students are interested in courses that tend to be very relevant to the POL students, the other program that we're also talking a lot about today. But we also have an ICE program, the International Comparative Education Program. And those students who have those joint MA MBA students who have a strong interest in international education often take a lot of these courses with faculty. It's not so much our school management courses. I agree with Lauren; those tend to be more domestically focused. But you know, Martin Carnoy, Chiqui Ramirez, Christine Watipka, Jennifer Adams, all of them are much more international focused. That tends to be the core faculty who teach courses more relevant to the ICE students. And those students, those joint MA MBA students with an interest in international education tend to take more of those courses, and the way the degree is designed, it allows for that kind of flexibility.
And just to add to that, I think there's like a lot more even within the school and like charter and district management, I think there might be more overlap, at least from talking to my international peers, than you might think. Like I have one of my close friends is from Wales and he's going back to Wales and wants to eventually work in the education system there, but has stayed in the U.S. for an additional 6 months to do an added internship because he saw the value that learning more about what was going on here might bring him in the future of his career when he goes back home.
And all I can add to that is that as you asked your question, I began to see faces that are now in South Africa, in Australia, in India, and elsewhere, and every one of them is engaged in launching schools or building a school network. And I think they found here a sense of how to go about that they drew from all the sources that Lauren and Nareda have mentioned. And they also found supportive faculty here to help them think through how their purpose could be landed in their particular place. So that kind of gift, I mean, what they bring to the program is enormous from where they've been, where they're going, what they're going to do.
Okay, great, thank you. Just one quick follow-up question to that, which I would have is, I've been hearing a lot about how with the recession coming in, it's becoming increasingly difficult for international students to get placements, to get jobs in the U.S. Do you hear that happening for students from the MA, MBA class as well, versus just the MBA program?
I don't think the placement numbers are out yet for this year. They usually don't finish them off till the fall. But Lauren, can you comment on the vibe that you've been hearing in terms of your cohort?
Well, all three of my international classmates are employed, one of them in the U.S., one of them in the U.S. temporarily and going back home, and the other one went back to her, and there might be more, but these are the three that first come to mind, went back to her country, and they all have jobs. So I can only speak in anecdotes because I don't know the whole class picture, but all of my, and like even from like a U.S., and this may, because this may be interesting to other people, like I found that my classmates who were not from the joint degree who were not employed immediately upon graduation were not employed immediately upon graduation because they hadn't exactly found the right fit yet, not because they were like not having interest from different organizations, whether those be like nonprofits, private, like public sector, like they were having plenty of interest and they were having good conversations. They were just still searching for what they wanted to do.
That tends to be a lot of the case, too, for the Pole students, too. I find that there are some people that, you know, it'll be August and they're still not employed, but it tends to be because they're holding out for something that they feel is a better fit. Like, no, these 3 job offers don't work for me. I'm gonna wait around for this one, and it's not going to come to fruition for a couple of months still, or it just doesn't feel right because it's not the right job in the right location, which, you know, that's a personal choice that people have to make. Some are more willing to make that in this economy than others. So something to keep in mind.
And the visa situation is still very much in play. I mean, I think we realize we've been hurting ourselves by sending wonderful, brilliant graduate students out of the country. I think that is really changing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Next question?
Yes, hi, this is Cabina. I'm wondering, you spoke about the kind of entrepreneurial feel on campus. Can someone speak to the social entrepreneurial feel? Like, is there a lot going on in that space or not so much? Is it more focused on the for-profit entrepreneurship?
I've seen a lot of social entrepreneurship happening on campus. There's 2 of our cross-listed courses this past year, which will be offered again this coming year, are taught by Professors Aubrey and Wei, and they're both focused on building social enterprises. The E-Week, the big entrepreneurship week that is sponsored Stanford-wide, has a whole session that's focused on social entrepreneurship. There's the Center for Social Entrepreneurship I don't even know if it's still at the GSB or it's actually gone more broadly since then. But they often host conferences as well as a quarterly magazine that's being printed. Anything, Gay or Lauren, that you can think of to add to that?
Well, I can add that every year the business school and the Pulse program serve as an incubator for people who want to launch their own nonprofits. And the social entrepreneurship takes many forms, but there are absolutely extraordinary initiatives coming out of teams of students who get great support from the business school and good support from the ed school as well.
One thing that comes to mind is that the public management program at the GSB, which all of our joint MA/MBA students qualify for, offers, I think that 2 years ago, they began offering a $90,000 fellowship if you're launching your own social enterprise. And Reed Steris, who is the founder of
Equal Opportunity
Schools, thank you, Gay, he was the first recipient of that award. And so that kind of atmosphere, I'd say, that kind of culture really permeates throughout the entire campus. I don't know if there's anything in particular you wanted to add to that, Lauren?
I guess the only other thing I would add and say is that if you're interested in social entrepreneurship, definitely play around a little bit on the, I mean, obviously both websites, but the business school website, they have a number of different courses that are kind of tailored over several quarters to help students launch enterprise or organizations, enterprises, whatever you want to call them. And I know that each year that these courses are offered, they have a cohort of students within these, like, basically incubators growing their own ventures that are focused on nonprofit. And there's an advisor who taught, was actually one of the best professors I had in all of school, Bill Meehan, who is he was a consultant for many, many years for nonprofits as well as for-profits. He is a mentor for all the students taking that class who want to launch not-for-profit ventures. So you're getting the same exact training that anyone would be trying to launch like a traditional profit-focused business, but you're getting it focused on like what you're interested in the social entrepreneurship kind of aspect of it.
And it was this past year, building on what Lauren said, that Bill Meehan created his own section. There was a section created for Bill Meehan because the interest in the nonprofit social enterprise world is growing in social enterprise versus just it being more of one or two groups within the larger class. There was so much demand that they just decided to create an additional section for social enterprise. We have time for one more question. Is there one more question that someone's burning to ask out there in the audience?
Hi, this is Alma. I'm interested in.
Could you please speak up? We can't hear you very well. If you wouldn't mind speaking up a little, please.
Sure. I'm sorry. It might be my speakers. Is that better?
It is.
Okay. So I'm interested in an MBA program, and my question was focused more on whether you have a lot of career changes. I have extensive touring experience, but I've never been involved in PFA or anything like that. So I would appreciate any tips on things to highlight in application or what I could be doing now.
Are you asking about career changers, Alma?
Yes.
Okay, so both programs do provide an opportunity for people who are interested in going from, Lauren, she taught and she did consulting and then came in to do the joint MA/MBA. Zoe had done 7 years of teaching. I think it would be a mistake to think that you have to have serious experience within education in order to be admitted to either program. What we do look for, however, is a commitment to the field, and that often happens through extracurricular activities. And I would think that before you want to take on this kind of degree to change careers into the field of education, you want to make sure that this is the right field for you. So while there are the people like Lauren and like Zoe who are admitted, there are also people who say, you know what, I've been doing finance for the last 4 or 5 years, and I find that Saturday mornings when I'm going to go work in this mentoring program, those are the days I really jump out of bed, and that's what I want. I want to focus more on the human capital development of society, and that's what I'm drawn to. So there's definitely, I wouldn't say that's the majority of people, but there's definitely a place for those individuals in both programs. And actually, as we're coming to the close of our hour together, I'd just like Lauren and Zoe, if you're still on the phone, are you still with us, Zoe? I think maybe Zoe had trouble reconnecting. But Lauren, maybe you could just close with this question, and Gay, if there's something similar that you want to add to. But what piece of advice, Lauren, do you wish you would have had before launching into your search for the right graduate school?
Oh, so before the search for Stanford. I would say, and I got this advice, so this isn't advice I didn't get, but I think it's probably the best advice I did get, was talk to as many current students and alums as you can. I think that what I found to be true was that when people talked about their Stanford experience, they just really lit up with excitement. And seeing that made me really excited to be there too, and that wasn't true across all of the different programs I looked at. And it also gave me kind of like more insight into what I wanted to take out of my experience when hearing other people reflect. So when I showed up on day one, it's a short time, only 2 years, and if you're doing the pulse program, it's even shorter. When I showed up on day one, I really knew the things I wanted to sink my teeth into so I could make the most of my time there.
Thank you, Lauren. Anything you want to add, any closing words of advice, Gay?
Well, I think my comment goes back to the last question that got asked. Come with an open mind and come with an open heart, because there are students here, many, 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 every year who think they know what they want to do, but by the end of the year, they have a broader and perhaps a different commitment. And there are students who come in saying, I have no idea what I want to do, I just care about education, and they find their passion. So the school is here as a great resource, and your colleagues will be a great resource, and then you go on to the rest of your life.
Thank you, Gay. And I just want to close thanking Gay for taking time out of her incredibly busy schedule as the new year is gearing up. Lauren, we know that you just started at your new position. Thank you so much. Zoe, I don't know if you're on listening, but thank you for your time. And I also want to applaud all the participants. This is the fact that you're taking your graduate school search this seriously, to take an hour of time and listen to what alumni and faculty have to say and ask your own questions. It says a lot about how serious you're taking your own sort of life purpose and whatever you end up doing with it. And I just applaud that, because I think there's a lot of people who spend a lot of their life floating, and the fact that you're asking these hard questions at this point in your life as to what I want to do, is education going to be a part of this, and how do I best prepare myself for it? Those are just excellent questions and an excellent investment of your time. So thank you for considering us, and we hope to answer your questions. We hope you had your questions answered today. We hope that in future webinars you continue to join us, and you can always also email us questions if for some reason you're not having them answered through the other means that we have available. Thank you all, and have a wonderful day.